I'm Father Scott Vanderveer, and this is Profiles of Endurance. Whenever we hear someone else's story about how they got to where they are in life today, it's always amazing to realize how many raging rivers have been crossed, how many obstacles have been overcome, how many struggles have been endured. That's true for everyone who gets married. It's true for everyone who finds their way into a career that is satisfying. And it's true for everyone who follows a call to religious or consecrated life. Father Dan Mchale had a long journey that brought him to be ordained a priest at age 41. And it involved facing a number of challenges and struggles that are a surprise when you see how fully engaged and alive and active he is today. It would be hard to know just by looking at the outside that he actually deals with chronic pain and a health condition that can't seem to be easily solved. He also had to endure a lot of pulls away from the calling that God had given him. We're here with Father Dan now to find out just how many challenges and obstacles were on his path and how he found his way through all of them with God's grace.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Father Scott. I appreciate everything you do here and all the help you gave to me during my discernment process. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's go back to the very beginning. Talk to me a little bit about your childhood and about what it was like growing up in your family.
Well, I'm the oldest of four. My parents, we grew up in Columbia County, but I was born in Corning when my dad was working for Ag and Markets out there. And the story goes, I was born in 1980. My parents were married in the fall of 77. And the story goes that my mom got homesick. And my dad didn't have a job ready for him in Columbia County, but they decided to move back. So here they are, moving back. My dad worked for a while at Stewart's before he got a job as a liquor salesman. And then he eventually got into where he was long-term food sales. And my mom, she raised me and my sister and Kristen, the second sister, and then the third sister, Kimberly. And then she went and became a medical transcriptionist like she was before she met my dad. So, we very normal childhood, I would say. Grew up in Stuyvesant, where, my parents have had that house since 1982. And, we went to church every Sunday, kind of the basic. I was an altar server, and then older, I was a lector, and until those things became uncool around the age 16, 17.
That's right around the right time.
Yeah. So, it was just a very basic, I would say relatively unremarkable by today's standards, Catholic upbringing.
And then you wound up, your parents had a child a little bit later when you were maybe in middle school. You have the youngest sister in the pack as well.
And there's also Therese. Yep, she was born in 91, so she was the youngest. There's a, sizable 11-year age difference between me and her. So the four of us kind of grew up there in Stuyvesant, very close to my grandparents in Hudson, where I spent a lot of summers. There weren't many kids my age on my street growing up, so I went there and was able to play wiffle ball and football with the kids. So and live with Nanny and Poppy most of the summers.
So what was your plan for life when you were little? And if somebody had asked you, Danny, what do you want to be when you grow up? What would you have said?
That's a good question, because I really didn't think I wanted to be a priest. It wasn't something that really crossed my mind. My mom claims that I said something in high school one time that I said I could be a priest. But it's funny, when I was real little and watched football and baseball, I used to say, I want to play for the Yankees or something, for the Bills. But then when I got a little older, I said, I want to be a game show host. I said in my mind, I never articulated that to anybody.
But which show had you?
I loved Trebek on
Yes.
Jeopardy.
Yeah.
And even other game show hosts too, like Bob Barker. But I never made plans to do that. And I remember in junior high school, we had a career day. How crazy is this? So a woman from, I think it had to be Columbia Green Community College, came in and talked to all of us and went around the class. And what do you want to be when you get to college and get out of college? And I had two choices. This is crazy. I said either a creative writer or a stockbroker. And I don't know where those came from, but it's just like completely different ends of the spectrum, So it was, eventually I did settle on a history major with the intent of initially going into law school, but that changed during my undergraduate.
Interesting to me that creative writing sounded good to you because, of course, what a lot of folks don't really think about when they think of the priesthood, but is really true, we have to come up with creative essays in the form of homilies all the time, many times every day, depending on the schedule that our church has.
Yeah, and I enjoy writing. I'm a notoriously slow writer, so I tend to write things better in my head and then say them than to put it on paper, because once it's on paper, I'll tinker with it and it'll take forever. So when I give my homilies, usually they're based on bullet points I memorize.
Yeah.
And you're right, there is a creative angle to it, though. There's always that hook that you want to bring people in with, that story of interest or personal interest story, to help relate the gospel to their lives. So I do see the connection there with the creative writing.
So when you were young, who were the role models of faith for you? Who did you look up to when you were thinking of somebody who really lived their faith, or who seemed to have a lot of faith? Who came to mind?
Well, Poppy lived the faith without talking about the faith, because he was always very generous and kind, and went to church every Sunday. We would always leave early as soon as the priest said, or the deacon said, the mass is ended. We would basically race to the back and try to make it to the parking lot to beat the traffic. But he modeled the way to live a Christian life, again, without being an evangelist. He wasn't vocal about it. He wasn't vocal about a lot of things. Never talked about, or very rarely anyway, his service in World War II and some of the crazy stuff he did see in battles in the Philippines against the Japanese. And also Father Bath. Father Bath was a role model, and was the pastor of St. Mary's Hudson when I grew up. He's still there as the pastor emeritus of what's now called Holy Trinity in Hudson. And it was just kind of his, just everything about what he modeled the priesthood to me. A lot of people have, unfortunately, some bad stories about things that priests said to them or way they treated them growing up, and people tend to remember those. But I can tell you that I have only good memories of priests growing up. Even one of the priests who left the priesthood, the late Father Jim Zagers, God rest his soul. He ended up having a very troubled life after he left, but he was also actually a very good model and a very good man to me anyway, as I was growing up as a kid. So I only have good memories of priests modeling the faith, which is, I think, probably in part explains where I am now,
If I understand your story right, you never really had a crisis of faith. You always believed, you always had faith, but you didn't always practice your religion. That's a story that I think a lot of people can relate to. What part of your life was it, and what was going on when you still had faith, but you stopped really actively practicing your religion?
It was in college, and it's interesting. So I went to Mount St. Mary College in Newburgh for history poli-sci, initially with the intent of being a lawyer, but about halfway through I said, I want to pursue history for a master's, and I want to teach, and that was the goal after, say, sophomore year. But around that same time, sophomore year, I started, went out with friends drinking, got a girlfriend, and just didn't put a priority on the faith. I always believed it in the back of my mind, but I always thought that it was something that I just didn't need to attend to. Because when you're young, you feel invincible, and you kind of prioritize things that maybe are more selfish and not of God and of this world. And it was just a life that, as somebody who lived, I wouldn't say a sheltered high school life, but somebody who didn't go out and party at all in high school. I had friends, to be sure, and we shared nerdy hobbies like collecting baseball cards, but it was just, I didn't prioritize the faith. And I'd say by sophomore into early junior year, I went to church maybe once a month there, even though church was 2 buildings away from the dorm, so.
That's a very understandable and relatable story for a lot of folks. And I think, there's some people listening that are listening maybe because they know you or they know me, but not because they're actively practicing their faith. Other folks are listening to this because they have children or grandchildren that they raised with weekly mass going and lots of traditions, and they're not practicing now. But one of the things about your story that I think is really interesting and maybe could provide some hope to people is that even in the midst of you not really practicing your faith, God really intervened and really spoke up. It's a remarkable story, and for those who haven't heard it, it really does spark a lot of new understanding of how God works. What happened on that day in college?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a story. It's funny how something happens to you, but then you tell it and tell it and tell it so many times. It's almost like it feels more distant as time goes on. But yeah, this did happen to me, and I always remember great advice I got when I interviewed for seminary from one of the priests, Father Yavaro, an interview with him. He said, "Hold on to that moment." He said, because you're going to need it at times. That kind of experience that and now I'm certain it was with the transcendental. It was an experience with God kind of breaking through to me at a time when I needed to break through. So I was lying in bed. It was probably around 6 a.m.-ish, and I was kind of half awake, half asleep, but more asleep than awake. And a voice said to me, "You need to go to Mass." And I woke up after that, and I didn't know. I knew they had daily Mass. Wasn't sure exactly when it was, so I think I looked it up on the computer. They did have internet then. It was a little more rudimentary, It was probably Netscape Navigator was the browser I used to look it up. And back in the year 2000, would have been the year 2000, fall of 2000. And so I think the Masses were 11:30 at the time. So I remember standing there in the chapel, thinking, what the heck am I doing here? And it was the faculty and a few of the nuns, the sisters, the Dominican Sisters of Hope, who were, I think most of them are now deceased, at Mount St. Mary. And the psalm antiphon that day was, "You will be a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek." And, it's one of those things that, it's funny because this past summer I watched the movie Field of Dreams with my dad. It was just happened to be on cable. And, the voice to, I think it's Ray was the main character, Kevin Costner played him. It's like, "If you build it, they will come." And he's like, "Who? What? What do you mean? Who will come?" And then eventually it becomes revealed to him. I kind of think of it like it's that voice that nobody else can hear, but all of a sudden when you're on the right path, you know something's there, that's you're not crazy. And that was kind of that moment. You will be a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. I actually never made that connection before to Field of Dreams, like kind of that voice, that still small voice that you hear. That's a great baseball movie as well. And so, yeah, and I held it together for Mass, and later that day I went back to my dorm and broke down crying, and I called Father Bath, and he ended up putting me in touch with Father Walsh, the vocation.
The very day you went home to your room, you went back to your room.
Yeah, I went back to my room.
And you called your childhood priest.
That's right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And you knew that something big had happened. You weren't trying to downplay it.
No, I wasn't. And I didn't, I was like, am I supposed to be a priest? Like, what is this? And it was, I would say it was the beginning of a personal call to holiness, that I tried to, and I started going to daily mass after that. I was very dedicated to going to daily mass, and it kind of, I kind of reinvigorated my relationship with the Lord. I remember reading a book on Padre Pio. I bought a book but never finished it on St. John Vianney. It was I still remember it was Father George Rutler's book, and I just like this is too heady for me. So I was like, all right, we'll pick an easier one.
You were 20 years old.
I was 20 years old exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I would do a rosary group there was a small group of students in Mount St. Mary that said the rosary, and anyway, and it was just me reconnecting with the faith. And I met with Father Walsh. I went to a few events, but then my senior year, again, I tried it. I always said if my junior year was my senior year, I probably would have entered into some kind of pre-theology program right there. But
wow,
at some point in senior year, I decided to put that out of my mind, the call that I had. It was more distant. I had some new friends. I just wanted to have a good time senior year. I was like, I still went to church, but I wasn't going to daily mass anymore. I wasn't saying the rosary anymore. So I didn't go back to my lazy, completely abandon the faith of sophomore year, but I decided, you know what, I'm not even going to pay attention to that. And I put it out of my mind. I really did, for the most part, that feeling, that call.
I have to say, though, if we were to pause there, there's no way for us to know what would happen in life if we made different choices than we've made. But I have to say this. The Father Dan Mchale that I know lived a very interesting and complex life for 20 years between the day of that miracle and the day of his ordination. If instead Dan Mchale had gone directly into a pre-theology program and become a priest then, he would have brought something very different to the table than you bring now. It feels almost like God may have really been well served by the detour, if it was a detour that you took.
Yeah. What's the phrase we use in Pope St. John the 23rd National Seminary for delayed vocations, right? That there's no delayed vocations, there's only vocations, and everything happens in God's time. And I think that my life had me serve a purpose, the life I lived between that time. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, nothing serious, but I also learned a lot and got to know some great people that are still very close to me in my life. And in some ways, I could say I deepened my faith and my commitment. Because who knows, I could have went into seminary at 21, got ordained a priest at 27, 28, and left at 30. True. You know what I mean? So because a lot of times as a young priests, not stereotyping or anything, but I tend to think the older guys at Pope St. John know why they're there, and the ones who are ordained, are 100% committed to that call.
That seminary, the one that you attended, the one that I attended, is designed specifically for vocations over age 30. And in fact, when I was there, and the same might be true, we have 8 years of distance between our ordination dates, but when I was there, the median age was in the 50s. The average guy there was somebody who'd had quite an extensive career before he came, and a number of the guys that were there had been married. Many of them were widowers. The others were people who had marriages that failed, but they had annulments, and so they were free to pursue another stage of life. And so there is, I think it's interesting for our listeners to know, there is an option out there for many people who have maybe had a call early in life and put it on a back burner, or God drew them into another area of life for reasons only known to God for a long time, that there is a chance to go to a formation program that honors, as you said, there's no delayed vocations, there's only vocations, and God's time takes care of everything. Now, you always had an interest in history and in older people. That's something that you've always had. That plays a big part in what happened in those intervening years. You had a really unique opportunity while you were studying history to experience something that many people never have had a chance to do in their life. And is it fair to say it started with a dream that you had one night?
Yeah. So after Mount St. Mary, I didn't go into the seminary, obviously. I went to SUNY Albany, where I studied history and got my master's in 2005. And so from right after I got my master's, I wanted to try to work off some of that college debt. And I had a little credit card debt as well. So I went back to ShopRite, where I've been working every summer since '98. And I went back there full time, and they hired me, and eventually I became a night manager there. And it was during that time of ShopRite that working like 50 hours a week, and it kind of felt like I was stuck in neutral, in a way. It's a great career, and actually today I would recommend it over people spending $200,000 in college debt to become a supermarket manager, over college debt. But anyway, I felt like I still had to go on. I had to go back and get my PhD. But the first year in my PhD program, I went back to UAlbany. My grandmother, Nanny, from Hudson, my maternal grandmother, developed lung cancer, and she passed away in October of 2007. So she was
a big loss. That's a big loss for the whole family.
It was, yeah. I mean, Nanny, she was a character to be sure, but she loved us all unconditionally. And she was someone who, she wasn't super faithful during her life. She used to have this saying, "We hope and pray there's a God." That was her. How crazy is that? Like how, that's like one of those interesting sayings. But then at the end of her life, she received the sacraments, and talked about how much she loved Jesus, and
she's the wife of Poppy, who took you like ducklings to church.
Yep. Nanny generally didn't go to church, and Nanny had a lot of issues with her neck and back as well. Excuse me. So she didn't always go to church, and towards the end of her life rarely did. It was hard for her to sit in one place. She would lay down a lot on the couch and watch soap operas and game shows. Golden Girls was a favorite that was on a lot.
It's everybody's favorite.
I know. Priest and counselor for people.
I think you're onto something huge there. I just really think that what you said is powerful. And it makes me think of a lot of places in the world where legalized euthanasia is being considered for vote. Should we as a society allow people to decide if their pain or their illness is such that they wish to not live any longer? And should there be legal abilities given to folks to make that decision? And I think for a lot of us, we can get very rational about the decision and say, well, shouldn't that be somebody's right if they want to? And it can sound very rational. But what you just said, it seems to me is a deeper wisdom when you say that if you had, in 2013, if you'd been told, we don't know what the future holds beyond 2021, but we will tell you you're going to have a headache every day for the next 9 years, you would have said, count me out. But you now, on the other side of it, say that it builds you up somehow. There's something in you because you endured this that wasn't there before you endured it.
Yeah, and I do believe that. I'm not going to get all theological, but the idea of redemptive suffering, that, we kind of unite our own suffering to that of Christ on the cross. I think that's a good visual image for me personally, but I don't know how much that would translate to me helping others, at least that explicitly. But just to let people know that they're not alone, that others are there with them to pray with them and help them through their own physical or spiritual or mental difficulties and pain and suffering. And I do think that suffering myself is going to allow me to help others deal with their own pain, whatever that pain may be. And so, I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't be a priest. I don't think, I know that, if I didn't have the headache. So it is part of God's plan. I really believe that. I really think that it was a combination of, something that humbled me in a way that brought me back to reconsider that call that I had buried in the deepest recess of my mind. That I didn't want to deal with that. That was something that I heard when I was younger. That doesn't apply to me now when I'm 33 versus when I was 20. And that's, the call never went away. Jesus never stopped calling me, but I had stopped listening. And that having the health issues kind of shook me up a little. And I think sometimes we might not want the crosses that we bear in this life, but we nevertheless are called to carry them. And this is the cross that I carry, and it's a cross that I carry with my Savior helping me carry it. So it's
I just think that's powerful.
But at the same time, I don't like being seen as a victim. I don't like, I don't want to be identified just with the headaches. You know what I mean? And so it's like this kind of dualistic thought pattern that I have, that I never want to be the victim. I never want to be thought that we have to give him less work because he's got headaches all the time. There's going to be times where I have to lay down, and need to, but I don't want. It's to me, it's something that got me here, and it's part of me. And if God takes this away from me someday, that would be amazing, But at the same time, I will carry it, and if that's what I'm called to do. So
it's powerful, and it's such an awareness that that all of us could point to the thing in our life that we are most burdened by, and we could say the words that you just said. This is a cross I carry, but my Savior helps me carry it. That to me is a huge shift when we realize maybe my cross is not the same as yours, but I have a cross that only I can carry, but my Savior is with me.
Well, you think of Saint Simon Stock, right? He helped Jesus carry the cross, but at the same time, the Lord was helping him carry a cross. Kind of flip that. I'm sure that he needed to carry that cross for whatever reason, and he looks over and Jesus is there with him. So it's kind of a different way of looking at the way he helped Jesus carry those beams of wood.
I know our listeners are really grateful for the chance to ponder and savor this. That's really powerful.
Does that make sense? I mean, I don't know if I've never actually formulated it like that.
It perfectly makes sense. Those beams of wood they represented the cross that he was carrying that nobody could see. The cross that he carried with Christ that everyone saw him carry also was accompanied by another cross that Christ was helping him carry.
That's right. Yep.
Dan, good news is you're a priest now. You are a priest
forever in the order of Melchizedek.
The thing that was said to you in the year 2000 when you were 20 years old is now true. What's it like? What have these first, at the time of this recording, we're talking about 2 months of priesthood. What has it been like?
Oh my God. Well, at first it was a whirlwind. You're ordained and you're like, okay, what do I do now? And then it's kind of weird because we didn't have an assignment right away. We had to wait a few days before we were called into Bishop Ed's office. We came in all together and we got our assignments.
You were priest without a parish for a while.
Priest without a parish, but I served in my home parish. Father Anthony Barrett, a pastor at Holy Trinity, let me and the other vocation from Holy Trinity, Hudson, Father Stephen Yesko, we concelebrated for a while, and Father Bath was also there. So we had 4 priests on the altar, and then a couple days they had a one of the Benedictine priests.
What priesthood shortage?
I know. So it was 5 priests on the altar on a weekday mass. I know it was great. But yeah, I mean, I'm in St. Thomas Del Mar and St. Matthew's, Voorheesville, and the people have been so welcoming. They are so happy to see. I mean, I'm 41. In no other career is that young. In baseball, I'd be about to retire. But here, it's like the young priest. And,
absolutely.
And I don't know how long that young priest label sticks.
I'm 46, and I still sometimes pull it off. We'll see. I think my days are waning, but I sometimes can pull it off.
Let me know in Glens Falls if they call you, oh, we have a young priest now.
Exactly, I will.
Yeah.
Trust me, I'll be shouting it from the rooftops.
You better be. So anyway, but it's been great. The people have been wonderful. They're receptive. They're welcoming. It's just been a joy to celebrate the sacraments, particularly the Eucharist, our most blessed sacrament, but also baptisms. I actually went down and baptized friends from college, their baby, Scarlet Rose, down in Monroe, New York. Friends I knew from Mount St. Mary College. And, just celebrating baptisms and the Eucharist and confession, reconciling folks to the Lord through that great sacrament. It's really what a joy and an honor to serve as a priest. It really is a joy. It's a lot of hard work, as you know, because you're running around a lot. In seminary, you're kind of more sedentary. You're in your room, reading a book, writing a paper on your laptop. But here, you're on the go, and but it's I wouldn't do it differently. I wouldn't change it.
It's a beautiful thing to hear that, and to know that you are so in the thick of things. And when you said too, you went down to baptize little Scarlet Rose, and I don't know if this is your experience, but you were with your friends from college, and although they still feel as close to you and as friendly with you as they did, they also save a space for you in their life that's a different role. They treat you also differently. While they're treating you as the same Dan they've always known, their faith tells them that Father Dan has a new role in their life, that this is both the friend they've always known and someone new in their life.
100%. Yeah, it is kind of an interesting dynamic, because you're you, but you're somebody new also. It is you're treated with it's a profound appreciation and respect, but there's still the deep bonds of friendship that you forge previously. It's still there, but it is different. Yeah, absolutely.
We're at the end of our time now, so I wanted to close out with just a couple of questions that I ask everybody who is a guest on the podcast. And one of them is to just wrestle for a moment with the question that so many people ask that doesn't have a clear answer, but really kind of resonates in the hearts of all of us. A lot of people, when something happens in life, will say, everything happens for a reason. And other people disagree. They say, no, it might not happen for a reason, but God helps us deal with it, whatever it is. Some things are just a result of people's free will, but God will be there with us in it. Other people say, it looks like free will, and we do have free will, but everything is really happening for a reason. What do you make of that? Does everything happen for a reason? As you look at your own journey?
I think God has foreknowledge of everything, but we have the ability to use our free will as a gift that God gave us. If we had to choose would you rather have a dog nature or a human nature? With all the consequences of our free will and our human nature, I think most of us would choose a human nature. And I do think that our decisions we make, God knows when we're going to mess up sometimes, and some of the bad decisions we make, but He doesn't cause them. So I tend to be a believer in free will being an important factor, and that God does know what's going to happen. To say everything happens for a reason necessarily, well, I think we do play our role, and if not, we wouldn't be responsible for our own misgivings and sins. So, and I think that for me, anyway, do I feel like I got headaches for a reason? Well, I feel like they were something that inspired me to consider the priesthood, but it was always my free will that allowed me to say yes or no to that renewed call. So that was a professor answer.
It's excellent though, because it really does show we don't get to. It's a great answer, and it helps us recognize that we are both able to answer this while still bowing down before the mystery of why things happen as they do. But it's a powerful thing to recognize. I love the question, did I get headaches for a reason? I think all of us can put something in the blank where headache was, to ask ourselves that, and then say, in the end, God is going to bring all things together for good, as it says in Paul's letter to the Romans. In the end, God is going to bring it all together for good. The last question for you is, you've had to endure quite a few things. You've had to endure having a calling and knowing that it was looming there. You've had to endure not being ready to answer it. You've had to endure years of headaches with NDPH. What do you think, as you look back over your life so far, is the key to enduring things? What's the key to the virtue of endurance?
For me, it's persevering and doing it just day by day. The future is scary, even for people who are completely optimistic. Sometimes, they look at the future. But I think if we take our faith journey each day and say, Lord, let me just live today the best day I can live, I think that's the way to kind of persevere through the worst times and the biggest troubles. The best advice I ever got in confession, and I've actually told other people this in confession, was the priest said, every morning you wake up, he said, say 2 things to God you're thankful for. First 2 things that come to your mind. And 6 out of 7 days of the week, I say them right away. And then the 7th, I'll wake up and then stretch. I'm like, oh, wait, I forgot to say them today. But I always tell the Lord 2 things I'm thankful for every day. And I think it kind of puts a positive cast on each day as I'm starting, even if there's something that's going to happen that day that I'm not looking forward to, or going to be, just, I don't want to go to a finance meeting, so I just, but I think starting the day with 2 things has helped me anyway. It's kind of just a mental, it's not only a prayer of thanksgiving, but it's kind of a mental way to set our own attitude towards each day.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And before we part, I'd like to just ask our listeners to join with us for a moment in just pondering some of the things that we've heard before we go our separate ways. And maybe you can just enter into a moment of quiet if it feels good to close your eyes or slow your breathing a little bit, so that you can focus a little bit on some of the golden nuggets that Father Dan has dropped in the path before us from his story. What would you thank God for right now if you woke up and had to come up with 2 things you're grateful for right away? What would your 2 things be right now that you're most grateful for in this moment? What were you thinking of when Father Dan said that there's a cross that he has to carry, but his Savior helps him carry it? What is that for you? What is the cross that you have to carry? And how does God help you carry that cross? Father Dan wishes he could live without headaches, but he's aware that living with those headaches one day at a time has built up something in him that he can't put words to, but that has value. How has your suffering built up something in you? What have you gained because of what you've endured that you would not have had you not had to fight that battle? How can your suffering help others as Father Dan's suffering is going to help him with others deal with their own pain? How can you offer what you've been through, not as a victim, but as a healer? Father Dan Mchale, talking to you is always a blessing. Talking to you with this beautiful podcast audience is an even greater, more heightened blessing. I am so grateful to God that you became a priest, so grateful that you responded so beautifully to God's call, and so grateful to have you a friend in my life. Thank you for all that you've brought to my life and to all of us.
Father Scott, thank you so much for hosting me and everything. You've been a great friend and somebody to talk to when times, at seminary in particular, got annoying sometimes. Just somebody to relate to and somebody to bring the love of the priesthood and make it real and just see a priest who's not only serving his people, but one that loves his people. And I know you love these people here and they love you.
Thank you.
And I know it's something that it's tough for you right now, this transition. So I'll keep you in prayer as I do every day. And, God bless you for your friendship. So
thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. The feeling is mutual. And God bless all of you out there. May God continue to guide your life with all of the struggles that are in your path. And may you feel the strength from your spiritual friendships the way we do from ours. God bless you all.